In this lecture, we'll be creating IK and FK rigs for arms. Okay, so I'm in a new startup file, and I'm going to create an arm. So I'll use the default cube for this, scale, Shift-Z, so it doesn't scale in the Z-axis, and probably something like this. G then Z to move that up slightly, Shift-D to duplicate, bring that down in the Z, so it's about here. So we've got the upper arm and the forearm, and then Shift-D to duplicate in the Z-axis, and I'll scale this one in the Z, so that's our hand. I'll make them a little bit more arm-shaped. So the top one, I'll go into edit mode, and I'll Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode, select the top, and just scale it up a bit. On the next one, I'll select the bottom and scale that down a bit, so it kind of looks a little bit like the upper arm and forearm. And the hand, I'll go into edit mode and do a loop cut around the middle. So Control-R, loop cut around there, double left-click to set that in place. In fact, I'll move that up slightly, so G then Z, and scale it in the Y. So we've got a tiny sort of hand shape there. And I'll also select all and scale in the X, so it's a thinner shaped hand. Maybe a little bit longer as well, so scale in the Z, a little bit longer, that makes more sense. I'll go back into object mode, select everything, and Control-A to apply any scale that I may have done. So if I press N on my keyboard, go to item, they've all got a scale of 1. Now just before I finish, I'm going to select the top one and rotate by the X-axis slightly, and then the lower arm are then X slightly. Go to side view and move the hand so it's just underneath like this. Having a slight bend to your arm and leg helps greatly in the rigging process, particularly when you're setting up IK. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Okay, so your challenge then is to pause the video and catch up with me making an arm. So the next stage then is to rig the arm. I'll press Shift-A to add, armature. Yours will probably pop up with a single bone. I'll select the single bone though, because of all my add-ons. Go straight into edit mode, select all, G to grab, move it up to the top, select the tail, G to grab, move it to the middle of the arm here, E to extrude out to the middle of the arm here, and E to extrude out for the hand. And that's looking fine. It's worth pointing out that I am in X-ray mode, and I haven't chosen to use the in-front option. It's not always best practice, but it's fine to do that for quick edits if you need to. What I'll do as well is I'll go back into object mode. It will be helpful to label these, so I'll select the top one, F2, upper arm, next one, F2, forearm, and the next one, F2, hand. Then I'll go back into object mode and I'll label this armature FK. Same for the cubes. I'll select the first one, upper arm, and I'll call this upper arm FK. Next one, forearm FK, and last one, hand FK. I've just noticed I put spaces in one and not the others. It doesn't matter at this stage. Lastly, I'll connect them up. So I'll select all, make sure my armature is the active object, and Control-P to parent with automatic weights. I'll select my armature, go into pose mode, and just test it out. I'm not too worried about the weights, but it looks like everything's set up nicely for this, so that's great. If some of your weights are slightly out, let's say I move this bone and the upper arm mesh moves, then you can obviously have a bit of practice and sort those out, but it's not important at the moment. So once again, pause the video, catch up with me, and create an FK rig for the arm. Okay, so the next stage then is to duplicate this and create an IK rig. So back into object mode, select all, G then X to move it across, Shift-D to duplicate in the X-axis and move that one back. I'll move this to a new collection, so M to move to new collection, IK arm, and therefore I'll move these into a new collection, M, new collection, FK arm. I'll hide the FK for now, and I'll quickly rename each of my objects. So the rig first, IK, I'll open up that hierarchy and just change each of these to IK. They've all got 001 on them as well. I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, so we're ready to set up the IK. Now, if you want a challenge here, you can have a go at setting up the IK by yourself. It's a good idea to save your work at this point, just in case you need to come back and follow through with me in case you make any mistakes. Okay, so hopefully you remembered, we need 2 extra bones, a control and a pole, and this bone here, the forearm bone, is the one that has the constraint that we add in pose mode. It doesn't matter too much the order we do that in, so I select the armature, and last time I set up the IK first, but this time I'll do it the other way around and set up these bones first, just to show you that it doesn't matter. So tab into edit mode, I'll select the tail, E to extrude in the Y, bring that out, select that bone, rename it target, and Alt-P to clear the parent because we want to be able to move this. Then we need another bone here, so E to extrude in the Y. Select that bone, F2, call it pole, Alt-P to clear parent. And last time again, I moved it out to the front here so that we had an angle to point our elbows at. Now it's possibly easier to have that out to the back. So I'll press G then Y, move it out to the back. So when we move it around, our elbow will point to that. Okay, so that's all set up. Now we need to go to pose mode to add the constraints. So Control Tab into pose mode, select the last bone in the chain. So we've got a chain of 2 for the arm, and we go down to the constraints menu, add bone constraint, inverse kinematics. For the target, I'll select the armature, select the bone, which is the target. We can leave the chain length at 0. I'll select the target, press G to grab, and that's working nicely. Now in this case, it doesn't matter too much if the hand is in line with the forearm. It generally does that naturally anyway, so we won't disconnect it. So I'll press Alt-G to remove that movement. I'll go back to our forearm, choose the pole target, select the armature, select the bone, which is pole, and again it flips around. Let's see which direction it is. It's positive 90 this time as we're going back. So I'll type in 90 and you can see that lines up. Let's grab the pole now, G to grab, move it side to side, and we can see that's working and moving our elbow. So hopefully you got an okay with that. I'll bring back the FK and we're all ready for animating. So if you had any trouble with that, then make sure you've caught up with me. And we've got an FK and an IK version of an arm rig. And we'll do some animating in the next lecture.